Thank you for listening to the Solanos Stories, a companion to the Smithsonian's traveling exhibit, Crossroads, Change in Rural America, presented in downtown Trinidad, Colorado. Solanos Stories salutes the farmers, ranchers, cowboys, and cattlemen who helped shape the Southwest, and their trusty hats. Joe Redlick. Joe Redlick, the man who wore me on his head, was born in the Van Houten coal camp on May 10, 1910. He was the son of immigrants to this country. His father worked hard in the coal mines. Martin Redlick, Joe's dad, came here from Czechoslovakia in 1906. That same year, a young woman named Josephine came to the coal camps from Bohemia. Martin and Josephine met, fell in love, and got married in 1906. Their daughter Marion, Mary to her friends, was born in November of 1907. Joe came along when Mary was a little past 2. They became close friends as well as brother and sister, and remained that until Joe died in 1980. In 1911, when Joe wasn't much more than a baby, Martin and Josephine took their young'uns and moved to the Yankee area. They started ranching at their place on Barella Mesa. Martin and Josephine worked their small spread, and Martin worked in the coal mines around Yankee. Josephine passed on in May 1942. Shortly after his mother passed on, like many young men, Joe hopped a bus and went to serve his country. No matter how far he got from home, he still loved the Raton area and its mesas. When Joe came back, he helped his dad and his sister work the ranch. Joe and his dad both worked in the coal mines and as ranchers until Martin died in 1960. Then it was up to Joe and Mary to keep alive the traditions their folks set down. Joe raised his calves on his spread up on Barella Mesa. It was a far piece from town, but Joe didn't let that stop his friendship with the people in Yankee Canyon. One of the families Redlicks were good friends with were the Spruills. When Mary and Joe went into Raton, they often stopped at Sam Spruill's for supper and conversation on their way home. Joe and Corbett were also good friends. Corbett had a semi-truck he called the Big White Elephant. Joe often went on the truck with Corbett to help him haul cattle. One of the hats Joe had before me tells me he was awful good to little kids, even though he never had none of his own. In April 1957, Sam Spruill lost his wife Elizabeth. When the family went to the funeral home for a private viewing, Joe, being a friend, was there to see if he could help. Sam's granddaughter, Carol Jean, wouldn't go in. She was just a little kid of 6. So Joe stood out there on the street with her, and the rest of the family went in to pay their respects. This happened again in 1959 when Paul Spruill, Sam's brother, passed on, and again in 1960 when Sam passed on. Carol Jean tells me she can still see the parking meter her and Joe stood next to. She says it was the same one every time and that Joe was there to help that little kid. In the early 70s, Joe and Mary retired, sold their place, and moved to Raton. When they got to Raton, they bought a home and lived there together until Joe passed on in July 1980. Joe was a good son, brother, and friend. The folks who knew him miss him still.